Hi everyone, and welcome to your weekly energy update, a general tarot guidance taking a look at how this week's energies are likely to influence our lives both individually and collectively. This reading also has a divine guidance part and a part where the universe advises us things to be careful with. And like always, this is a general reading, so just take in what resonates and fits your own unique situation and discard everything else. Now, I must say that this particular reading is a little bit shocking for me as well. Because even though the astrology of this week does speak about a lot of chaos, a lot of tension, a lot of unexpected twists and turns, it also speaks about clarity, truth, or at least us, all of us, one way or another, individually, in our own personal circumstances, are on a journey, symbolic journey, towards reaching greater clarity. This is the week where Mercury finally stands still in the sky and goes direct. And even though it's not out of shadow yet until the 7th of July, still this is where clarity begins. We are likely to have sudden realizations, epiphanies, deep contemplations about what we have to do in our own personal lives, what we feel towards certain things, certain events, the world, external reality, or a specific area of our lives. So basically the main theme which this Mercury retrograde period marked as unclear, uncertain, those things that we were invited to rethink, reanalyze during this larger Mercury retrograde season. So the process of obtaining clarity, knowing what we want, knowing what we stand for, knowing what we can work with, we can accept, we can love, etc. So what we're taking with us into the future, that process of knowledge begins almost immediately, and slowly but surely until the 7th of July, we are guided to embody the conclusions which this clarity highlighted in our lives, in our minds, in our hearts. And of course, we also have a revelatory full moon in the sign of Capricorn. And when I say revelatory, it is because at the time of this full moon, Mercury goes direct and Jupiter goes retrograde. And both of these planets, Jupiter and Mercury, have a lot to do with the truth, with reality, with the way we observe and process reality. Of course, from totally different ways of expression. Mercury rules Gemini, the third house, our lower mental functions, but that is extremely important because that is how we interpret what our senses, even the most subtle senses, pick up. That is how we alchemize it into information, practical, concrete information that we can use. And then Jupiter is the ruling planet of Sagittarius, and Sagittarius is the ninth house, the opposite house, opposite sign of Gemini, the third house, which means that it is responsible with our worldview, with our philosophical way of thinking. So even though it's not that practical, it is not that down to earth, it is partially at least based on our beliefs, what we want to believe, what we hold as valuable source of knowledge. So it is rather subjective, but basically everything that takes place in Sagittarius is projected onto Gemini. So one way or another we interpret it and we use it in a very practical manner. So basically when the ruling planets of these two very important parts of the sky change directions at the same time, well, this Jupiter going retrograde will basically invite us to feel through with maximum intensity all of our subjective truth. And Jupiter is in its other ruling sign of Pisces, so it is also about resonance, about intuition, about inner voice, and I can even say even instinct. So this energy of the subjective truth is that much stronger because, we just know what resonates and what doesn't. We don't really have to think a lot. We just have to allow the feeling to set in. And then Mercury going direct at the same time, we will definitely feel an urge, an impulse to act on our subjective truth, as in the way we interpret it, the way our minds translate what it means for us personally. We are very likely to at least think about making choices built on what resonates and what doesn't. And, on its own, this is a really positive energy. This is really helpful. This is like being able to just embody our truth that much more intensely. And that's also what the astrology tells us. Yet the cards, well, they depict a certain aspect of this which may not be extremely pleasant or easy to work with. Because some of the clarity, the truth, whatever we resonate with, or more importantly, whatever we no longer resonate with, it kind of has a nuance of a strong disappointment to it. And I'm really sorry to say this. I'm really sorry that I have to speak about this side of the deal. But certain times in life it takes a very bitter, a very strong disappointment for us to be able to release something which basically no longer resonates in our lives. It doesn't represent us anymore. It doesn't represent our values, our future aspirations. So many times the mind battles the heart because the mind may kind of know rationally that it's kind of outdated, that it's time for a change, or this really doesn't fit into who it is that we are on life's terms, not necessarily what we dream or what we aspire to become. So it is a very realistic kind of energy where, we kind of get really disappointed in false hopes, unfounded, let's say, optimism or positivity. And at the same time, this is also a really strong karmic energy, where basically the karmic forces are going to show us, of course, in our own unique, special ways, how we interpret reality, basically. That, for the collective, for humanity as a species, well, things are not gonna get that much better overnight. Chances are things are gonna get worse before they get better, because that's the kind of karma humanity has. So who is not part of this picture, basically the individual, their only choice is basically to detach themselves from the karma of their species, if this makes sense. So this week is going to be like a massive wake-up call, like a massive inner calling to detach, to give up any aspirations of wanting to be part of, let's say, the collective, society, the ways of the world. And this is going to be so very intense that I do believe a lot of people will take maybe swift, rather impulsive action, maybe this week, to basically withdraw themselves from an area of life where they were really immersed into, where they shared, let's say, ideas, values, communications with other people. So this is basically like not just giving up aspiration, stopping believing in something, but also taking action to withdraw. But how this energy may play out personally, I'll get to that in a second, because first of all, we have to take a look at how this plays out collectively. Well, and chances are that this Uranus-Saturn-Mars T-square is really, really going to agitate people, emotionally especially. And one way or another, it will become so very obvious for most of us just how profoundly unhappy, how profoundly dissatisfied people are, not just with how, let's say, the ongoing theme of this year and even last year of how centralized power tries to fix and solve the situation. It goes way beyond that. It's just like a massive emotional wave and energy of disappointment, unhappiness, and perhaps the keyword here is mistrust. The Ace of Cups reversed. This is where the mistrust doesn't necessarily come because of lack of rationality, logical ties between what they do and what they say, and this whole situation, its sources rather from the deep world of emotions, the soul. So when unhappiness is on the soul level, not because certain things don't make sense, or dissatisfaction is rather a logical, rational process where you weigh certain things and they are not in balance. So of course this leaves dissatisfaction. When it's purely emotional, well, it doesn't really have to make sense because it is just a very strong feeling. And this is definitely going to be expressed one way or another. May they be protests, demonstrations, petitions, or people like sabotaging big companies, trade, etc. And this Three of Coins reversed. Well, on one hand, it also means an economic chaos, a financial chaos, but that will be made even worse because this can also represent that a certain category of people, workers especially, maybe workers from an industry, workers like an airline, an important airline, for example, railway, healthcare workers, or, workers in general are gonna stop their activities and protest, strike, demand their rights, demand their voices to be heard. So there is gonna be a lot of disruption, a lot of blockages, a lot of challenges with services, with jobs, with recruitment, employment. And this is gonna appear on one side or on one specific area in the world, and the gesture itself is gonna almost like spread like wildfire, but it's gonna be really disruptive. The Hermit reversed is service, so it will impact everyday life, everyday routine in a very significant way, regardless of what category of workers decide to protest. The Death and the Three of Wands reversed. The Three of Wands can be seen as travel, but it can also be seen as navigation on sea. So both of these areas can suffer blockages, they can suffer great delays, financial losses, new restrictions, or trade between two parts of the world or two countries, two nations can be suddenly put on hold, and this will definitely cause like an economic instability going in chains. But I must repeat that perhaps the highlight is on the feeling of people, how people feel. And this is like a global energy where unhappiness, dissatisfaction, disappointment, mistrust just fills the air. It saturates everything. So you can imagine that everyone is gonna be emotional, everyone is gonna be a little bit wishy-washy and quite radical, passive-aggressive. So this can also represent a lot of conflicts, challenges in any relationship. Work relationship, contractual relationship, romantic. It is gonna be chaos in its full swing. But this is where it's not the exciting kind of chaos where it can go both ways. This is where chaos is fueled by emotion. So that means it will kind of disrupt everything. And personally, well, this energy is just as intense, if not even more intense than collectively. And a part of it is detachment. But this isn't the healthy kind of detachment where you understand that this step is necessary, you make the plans, you have your own modus operandi and then execute it. This is the sudden, unexpected inner rebellion where you just cold turkey abandon something. And for a lot of people, this can even mean job, this can even mean career, the hermit reversed, especially healers, counselors, advisors, healthcare workers might all of a sudden decide that this is ruining my life, so I'm gonna stop now, regardless of what that means. While other people will just make the plan to leave their usual working life behind and try their hardest to come up with something way more like self-sufficient, because their mistrust in society and the way things are evolving, going right now is going to be so great that they will think that if I don't find an ingenious solution to be able to take care of myself without having to rely on a government, society, other people, the constructs which basically hold human civilization together, I might be in a big trouble, so I better start making some radical changes in my life. This is also perfectly valid regarding, spirituality and one's spiritual path. This is where a lot of people are gonna just awake to the fact that their own unique path is not what they thought it was until this moment. What they thought it was much more like, the compromise, the spiritual, emotional, philosophical even, compromise that they had to accept to feel that they're part of a community, of a group, for example, the awakening, or a specific group with some ideological path which resonated until that moment, which reflected their own aspirations as well. This is where a lot of people are just gonna quit cold turkey and detach from, what they call a soul tribe and soul family. This is where they're gonna be shattered. And of course, this has a really positive side, even though this is the energy of deep spiritual disappointment. Well, the positive side is that they're gonna discover that they are perfectly able to feel, process, think, even philosophize for themselves. They will just awaken to the fact that the divine source, let's say the Akashic records, call it whatever you want, the divine source of information is connected to them personally as well. So do they need anyone or anything to translate certain information to them personally? And they will definitely reach the conclusion they don't need anyone. They don't need ancient philosophies, ancient cultures. They don't need another person, a guru, a book, a course, a know-how, anything. They are perfectly self-sufficient. And chances are with the ancient culture and history and sacred text, no one guarantees that they're authentic and real. So they will choose to rather believe themselves, their inner voice, their own spiritual resourcefulness than other people. And more importantly, they will decide that they don't want to share their experiences with anyone else. They are just gonna wake up to the fact that when fate wants something, then that is unavoidable. You don't need manifestation. You don't need techniques. Fate has its own course, its own power, its own methods, even in the madness. And very many times what we manifest for ourselves is usually the worst idea ever, and it will not take us far. For other people, this will come through as a desire, an urge to just simply disconnect from that which is not real, which means friends and friendships and connections on the internet, on social media. This energy is one which will really break up virtual communities and groups and everything of that nature. Everyone will, the hermit reverse will have this inner calling that they're more than self-sufficient, they're perfectly able to exist and take care of themselves. So everyone is going to be much more inclined to truly mind their own business, live their own life story, and stop sharing, because there is a moment when sharing is unhealthy. And this withdrawal, this separation from the collective, for some people this can even go into extremes where they don't just separate from a virtual collective or spiritually, they will just tell their friends, their even real life connections that, look, I'm just going on my own path, I'm doing my own thing, and if you want to still be part of my life, then we have to meet, or our relationship, even if it's a friendship or any nature, has to play out on neutral ground and not really in a place or a situation or a location, let's say, which really reflects the ways of the world. And of course, for other people, this means like a radical 360-degree change of their plans, future goals. All of a sudden, they're not looking for great success, triumph, accomplishment, but they will be looking for ways in which to be self-sufficient and not having to share too much with other people. But as I said, this is not in a selfish way. This doesn't mean lack of empathy, compassion, solidarity. Quite the opposite. It means embodying all of these virtues in a very, very healthy and detached way. This is where they might find that they in themselves and in their lives and in so very many areas are not afraid, they are not really concerned, they are not really unhappy, and the only way to block out fears, unhappiness, dissatisfaction, and illusions, of course, is to block out the source. And even if this means a radical detachment, well, it is heading towards a kind of life where happiness is at least possible, for the simple fact that they have everything they could possibly need within them to be happy, and they will finally see this as the biggest gift ever, so they will do everything that they need in order to make this as real and as stable, as long-lasting as possible. And of course, this gesture will be a massive game changer in their careers, in their professions, in their livelihood, the way they earn money, the way they make a living. But this is going to be such a strong impulse that chances are those people who are going to experience this are just going to do everything within their power to make this, as I said, as real as possible. So this isn't really susceptible to rethinking, second thinking, another analysis. This is where their decision is almost final. And even though the execution part is a little bit complicated and difficult, because Hermit reversed, Three of Coins reversed, Ace of Cups reversed, like everything is missing, but at least this is their true desires, this is their true wills, this is the way they see their futures, and there cannot be anything more authentic, more true, more real than what you discover deep within you at the very core of your sovereign will. So basically, this is where the profound disappointment with what was in their lives, in their aspirations, who and what they were connected to, this disappointment is going to help them never ever to second guess what they feel deep within themselves to be their truth. And as a divine guidance, we have the Six of Swords and the Five of Cups. This also speaks about disappointment, where this Six of Swords can represent the gesture of abandonment, where a lot of us are definitely gonna abandon that which disappointed us deeply. May that be a job, may that be a spiritual path, a philosophy, faith, a relationship, a friendship, a way of living a certain area of life, regardless of what this is. This is abandonment, leaving it behind, moving on, even if we know that there is going to be a transition period that we have to overcome, basically. Yet still, the Six of Swords is really important because it means that our minds, our rationality, our mental sphere, our thoughts, exactly the energy of Gemini, Mercury and Gemini, the light of our consciousness is gonna find this decision, this choice, or this aspiration to be the most logical choice that one can make under the present moment circumstances. And the conclusion is a future Six of Swords based on living life, good or bad, secure or insecure, grounded or ungrounded, but just living life is much more satisfying. It is much healthier to have as a future, even if sometimes it's a risk, even if it's adventurous, perhaps not always in the most favorable sense. Well, it is still better than living a construct of someone else's mental sphere, someone else's image, someone else's idea of what life should be. May this be society, may this be the rules, regulations, customs, perhaps the unwritten ones which govern society the way it is right now, that you need to have a career, internship, papers, diplomas, degrees, interviews, salary like this and like that, this kind of insurance, that kind of insurance, taxes. And it's not that they will withdraw from all of this, but rather, they will have very strong boundaries of what they allow in their lives and what it is that they will definitely cut off. And from a strict spiritual perspective, well, this is where a person's own rationality, logic, sense of truth, the processes of the mind, how it interprets reality, will definitely override the collective illusion. So the collective illusion, even from a spiritual perspective, will disappoint them so profoundly that there will be no turning back to that again. So they will make this choice that from now on they will think, they will philosophize, they will research channel, whatever it involves for themselves, and no longer believe even a word that someone else says. They might just take it into perspective, into consideration, think about it, philosophize it, but no longer will they basically feed on another persons, another groups, another gurus, another spirits even, way of interpreting reality, spirituality, the soul, and everything that has to do with one's spiritual path. Now, what to be careful with? Well, we have the Fool and the Devil here, and one way or another, symbolically, the combination of these cards mean taking our power back. The Fool can be seen as a strong inner rebellion where you just break the cycle, break free from everything that you feel like it's holding you back, suffocating you, limiting your soul. This is like a gesture where you just break free from every single karmic pattern playing out in your life, especially the more limiting ones. And the more limiting ones are basically your family's karmic pattern, where you are a family member, like it or not. So you are also affected by it. And also certain karmic patterns coming from your own past existences. Now these two karmic patterns are very subtle on one hand, because a person might not really give as much attention to these because they don't have that much to do with their choices, with their personality basically, who they are in this incarnation. We can't help who we were in another lifetime, let's say. Neither can we help the family karma. And throughout life, many times blindly, we just follow the patterns. We get sucked into certain karmic discharges, which balance out this side of karma as well. And we're kind of helpless because we're part of it. We signed up for that by the sheer fact of being born. But there are also moments when the universe gives us chances to await from it to break out. Because, otherwise it would just keep on running and running and running. Even if it would mean no, let's say, true implication from our behalf. Because we might have already dealt with it. What had to happen already happened in our lives, etc. So even if we lived out our part, because we're still connected, it can still influence us one way or another. For example, if the cycle in the family, let's say, means that a moment of great unhappiness or restlessness has to influence the whole family, well, even if you're not directly involved in that, even if you did your part, well, it will still influence you one way or another. But breaking out of this, basically assuming rulership over your life and destiny, either in a very direct manner or basically just silently, where your soul does this, maybe unconsciously, not necessarily under your conscious supervision, if this makes sense. That is still a gesture through which you kind of take total ownership of what is gonna happen in this lifetime, the remaining of it, almost 100%. This is where you become the king of your own castle. And yes, that means great power, but it also means responsibility. Because being caught up in family karma, let's say, also has good sides to it. For example, certain kind of help, solidarity, and karmic soul contracts where, like, maybe a family member, a parent, an uncle, any kind of relative is responsible to aid you when the time and fated patterns require it. So that is something that you will have to give up on. But why all of this appears in the to be careful with section, especially if it doesn't really depend on you, it doesn't really involve a very conscious energy under your control. Even if it's a very intelligent energy, the Fool is Uranus. Well, it's your higher self, your superior intelligence, that which isn't fully embodied. So, you are gonna feel it as a very strong restlessness, as a very strong, let's say, inner chaos, which might have no logical explanation. And at the same time, this is the kind of energy which definitely leads to what, in modern spirituality they call either DNA upgrade or activation or whatever. This will have like strong physical effects, which even though might be uncomfortable, and that is why is the to be careful with section, to prepare you that discomfort is on its way, it's coming, even physically. But the good side of this, if you don't panic, if you allow, if you go with the flow, if you don't let that restlessness turn into like pain, you just know what's going on, well, this can actually influence your physical life in a very positive way. Because as I said, all of the other cards, the other energies, the other sections of this reading speak about detachment, abandonment, cutting the cords, cutting ties. So that might leave you materially vulnerable. But this is where the Devil card is quite positive, because something instantly might take the place of what you have to give up on or what you have to cut out of your life. So that means some kind of security, stability, for example, a job, a livelihood, an income, material security in any way, shape or form, but of course with a compromise attached to it. You will have to sacrifice something in order to obtain this, and chances are whatever you have to give up on is gonna kind of feed your shadow. But this kind of represents where you are the ruler of your own castle now. So you have to take care of your shadow not to become unbalanced. Like, just let me give you an example of what this can mean. You know, let's say a person just quits their job, quits everything, cuts all ties, and just decide that they're gonna be free and independent regardless of what it takes. And this might mean very strong material troubles, and all of a sudden someone shows up in their lives who might not really be a soulmate, so to speak, but it might be a person with great material power, and there might be a strong attraction between you and that person, and there might be the solution to your material troubles. But you might have to control yourself in order not to manipulate this person, not to enslave this person, and not to, hold their own attraction against them. For other people, this can represent like a job which is very easy, and it also allows you time for yourself, and it does provide, the basic requirements, but that's about it. So you'll have to live with it. You have to accept it. You might have to give up a career which is much more prosperous, but it's robbing you from your life, from your time, from whatever makes you happy. So this might be seen as a downgrade, but a very healthy downgrade, which will allow you to just live your life. So basically the advice here is not to be afraid to go with the flow, even though it's gonna be chaotic and it's gonna be not so very easy to understand what the divine actually wants, because as I said, the solution to your problem is the devil, so it's very tempting, very appealing to a certain part of your being, but the devil is there basically actually to guide you based on your weakness, your temptation, whatever floats your boat, if this makes sense. So it is the power of attraction, which means that maybe fanatically fighting what we perceive as a temptation or what we perceive as a rather unfair gain or a massive benefit. But the universe can only work with the prime material that it has. And if it works through people, well, people are kind of corrupted. They are kind of extremely open to their attractions, manipulation, their weakness, their darkness. So if that is how it manifests, that is how it manifests. And it's not a reflection of who you are, but it's rather a reflection of how the world is right now. So sometimes in life, it's actually morality seen in a very rigid and almost fanatical way, which can kind of limit us. But even though this is not necessarily the case right now, because as I said, the fool, this is where we might not have any control. It just happens, we go with the flow, like it or not. But at least we shouldn't feel guilty. We should accept whatever the universe can deliver to us at this present moment. A solution, a source of stability, so to speak, regardless in which sense, well, it's still better than nothing. So basically this concludes the reading. This is what the cards have to say to us this week. It's gonna be shocking, it's gonna be unexpected, it's gonna be a really powerful game changer emotionally. But this is where we have to go with the flow, because at one point in our journeys, in one way or another, we ask for this, and now we're getting the truth, what truth means to us. So we have to embrace it, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it's disappointing and disillusioning. Sometimes it is exactly disappointment, which is the divine grace of salvation, and not the illusion, the lie, that which is sugar-coated, but it's rotten in the middle. So thank you so much for listening. I do hope that this was helpful. If you'd like to support my work, you can donate on the PayPal link in the description below. Wish everyone a wonderful week and a really prosperous full moon in Capricorn. Thank you again. Until next time. Bye for now.